The hum of a fluorescent light is a sound you don't really notice until it's the only sound there is. And at 2 in the morning in a place called Suds and Duds, it was the unofficial soundtrack to my own personal purgatory. I was 20, a sophomore at Northwood University, and my presence in this forgotten corner of the city was a monument to a week of bad decisions. Midterm papers I'd pushed to the last minute, a misguided attempt at a social life, and the simple, unglamorous reality of executive dysfunction had conspired against me. The 3 industrial-sized washing machines in my dorm basement had been out of commission for days, bearing a passive-aggressive laminated sign that read, "Awaiting parts. Your patience is appreciated." My patience, along with my last clean pair of socks, had evaporated 2 days prior. So there I was, with a hamper full of everything I owned, standing under the flickering green-tinged lights of Suds and Duds. This place wasn't just old, it was a fossil. The linoleum floors were a checkerboard of bile yellow and dusty brown, the corners dark with years of grime. A complex network of cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, a testament to every heavy machine and clumsy patron that had come before. The walls were a pale, sterile mint green, the kind of color you see in old hospitals, and they were adorned with yellowed, peeling notices. No dyeing of clothes. Do not leave laundry unattended. Management is not responsible for lost or stolen items. A whole list of rules for a society that had long since abandoned this outpost. I was the lone inhabitant, save for a woman I'd passed on my way in. She was wrestling a massive, clear bag of folded clothes out the door and shot me a look that was equal parts pity and exhaustion. It should have been a warning. The layout was a simple, stark rectangle. On the left, a row of 10 top-loading washers stood like silent soldiers. On the right, a matching set of massive industrial dryers, their circular glass doors like dead gray eyes.
The back wall featured a change machine that looked like it had been pilfered from an ancient arcade, its plastic casing sun-bleached and cracked, and next to it, a long plastic bench bolted directly to the floor as if to prevent any patron from getting too comfortable. I chose a washer in the middle of the row, a safe, non-committal spot. I loaded my clothes in, the sheer volume of the pile a testament to my poor life choices. I was a stranger in a strange land. My entire laundry career had been spent in the coddled environment of the dorm's single-button machines. Here, the washers had complex dials with cryptic settings like perm press and knit delicate. I just turned the knob until it made a satisfying clunk, poured in what I hoped was the right amount of detergent, and prayed I wouldn't be leaving with a basket of pink-tinged shrunken clothes. As the machine lurched to life, filling the room with a rhythmic churning slosh of water, I retreated to the bolted-down bench. I'd brought a textbook for my History of Agrarian Societies class, a course I was spectacularly failing, but the thought of trying to absorb information about 18th century crop rotation under the sickly buzzing lights felt like a fresh level of hell. I opted for the path of least resistance, my phone. I scrolled through the endless, numbing feed of other people's lives, political arguments, and cat videos, letting the digital noise drown out the hum of the lights. The air in the room was a palpable thing, a thick cocktail of warm, damp cotton, stale air, and the sharp chemical tang of industrial-strength lavender fabric softener. Outside, the city was asleep. The street was a deserted canyon, bathed in the lonely, monochromatic orange glow of the sodium streetlights. For the first 20 minutes, it was almost peaceful, a pocket of forced stillness in a life that felt increasingly chaotic. I was alone, I was being productive, sort of, and soon I'd be back in my room, surrounded by the familiar comfort of my own mess. That was the plan, anyway, a simple, straightforward plan. I was deep into an article about a film director feuding with an actor when the glass door at the front of the laundromat swung open, its pneumatic hinge letting out a long, weary sigh. The sudden gust of cool night air that washed over me felt like a disruption of the stale, warm atmosphere. A man stepped inside. He was aggressively average, a mosaic of forgettable features. Medium height, medium build, clad in a plain, nondescript gray hoodie and a pair of jeans that were worn but not dirty. The kind of person you could pass on the street 1,000 times and never remember. The first red flag, though my brain didn't register it as such, was that he wasn't carrying anything. No laundry basket, no duffel bag,
not even a single pillowcase. He simply stood there for a moment, framed by the doorway, as the closer hissed the door shut behind him. His eyes, two dark, flat points in an impassive face, did a slow, methodical sweep of the room. They passed over the row of silent washers, lingered on the inert dryers, and then landed on me. The look wasn't casual. It felt evaluative, a quick, silent appraisal. It lasted only a second or two, but it was long enough for the tiny hairs on my arms to prickle.
He looked away as if he'd seen nothing of interest. My mind, always eager to normalize the unusual, immediately started generating explanations. He's waiting for someone. He lives upstairs and is just grabbing a soda. He's checking to see if he left something here earlier. The man walked over to the ancient change machine, his worn sneakers making soft, rhythmic scuffs on the cracked linoleum. He rattled the coin return slot with his finger, a hollow, metallic clatter that echoed in the quiet room. It was, as I suspected, empty. Then he turned his attention to the washers. He began to walk slowly down the line, starting with the one closest to the door. He'd stop at each machine, lean forward, and peer into the small, round glass window, as if fascinated by the mundane sight of an empty metal drum. It was strange behavior, but I dismissed it. Just a weird guy. This part of town had its share of them. I convinced myself he was just killing time. Then he got to my machine, the only one running. He stopped. He leaned in, placing his hands on either side of the glass portal, his face just inches from the churning water. He watched my clothes, my t-shirts, my boxers, my mismatched socks, tumble and twist in their sudsy ballet. He wasn't just glancing, he was studying them. He stayed like that for what felt like an impossibly long time, a statue of strange intent. My internal monologue, which had been trying to soothe me with rationalizations, now started screaming, "This is not normal. Why is he doing that? What could possibly be interesting about my laundry?" I forced myself to look down, fixing my gaze on the glowing screen of my phone. I scrolled with a frantic intensity, pretending to be utterly captivated by a recipe for vegan chili. But I could feel him. It's a primal sense, the feeling of being watched, a weight, a pressure. The air in front of me felt thick with his attention. Finally, after an eternity that was probably only 60 seconds, he straightened up. He turned, and I risked a quick glance from the corner of my eye.
He walked over to the plastic bench on the opposite wall, the one directly across from me, and sat down. He didn't pull out a phone. He didn't close his eyes to rest. He just sat, leaned his head back against the mint green wall, and fixed his gaze directly on me. There was no pretense now, no attempt to hide it. His purpose for being in that room was singular, to watch me. The laundromat, my temporary, peaceful sanctuary, had just become a cage, and I was suddenly, terrifyingly aware that I was not alone. The washer cycle concluded with a loud, definitive kerchunk, the sudden silence amplifying the ever-present hum of the lights above. That hum now sounded like a dentist's drill, a low, unnerving whine that vibrated in my teeth. For a solid minute, I didn't move. My mind was a frantic whirlwind of pros and cons. I could just leave, grab my soaking wet clothes, stuff them into the hamper, and make a run for it. The thought was incredibly tempting. I could picture it, the cold, damp pile sitting in my dorm room, starting to smell of mildew, the hassle of trying to hang dry 2 weeks' worth of clothes from every available surface. It would be miserable, but it would be a safe misery. Then another voice, a stubborn and prideful one, chimed in. "Don't let him chase you out. You paid for this. It's a public place. You have a right to be here." It was the kind of pointless defiance that sounds brave in your head, but feels incredibly stupid in practice. Steeling myself, I stood up. I tried to make my movements casual, fluid, as if I hadn't a care in the world, as if I were totally oblivious to the man whose eyes were boring into me. As soon as I was on my feet, he stood up too. The synchronicity of it sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my system. My heart, which had been doing a nervous tap dance, now started a frantic drum solo. He didn't approach. Instead, he began to pace. He walked a slow, deliberate circuit of the room, from the front door, along the wall of dryers, to the back wall, and then back along the washers. His path formed a neat, tight rectangle around the room, and I was the bullseye at its very center. Each time his soft, scuffing footsteps passed behind me, I could feel the change in the air, a subtle shift in pressure that made the skin on my neck and back crawl. I grabbed one of the large rolling wire baskets, its wheels emitting a high-pitched squeal that grated on my nerves. I began transferring my wet clothes, the fabric heavy and cold in my hands. I fumbled, dropping a shirt on the grimy floor. I hesitated, then quickly snatched it up, a fresh wave of disgust and anxiety washing over me. I pushed the squealing basket over to the row of dryers, deliberately choosing one at the far end of the room, the furthest one from him. I started loading the clothes in, one piece at a time, stretching the task out, my movements becoming inefficient and clumsy. I was stalling. Every second I could stretch this out was another second for someone else, anyone else, to walk through that door and break the spell. But the street outside remained empty. The glass door remained stubbornly, terrifyingly shut. The man stopped his patrol and leaned against the opposite wall, crossing his arms over his chest. He was much closer now, no more than 15 feet away. He watched me load the last of my clothes into the dryer drum. "You a student over at Northwood?" he asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, but it cut through the silence like a knife. I flinched, startled by the direct question. I looked over at him and saw he was nodding toward my sweatshirt, the one I dropped on the floor. It had a big, obnoxious university logo on it. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. I slammed the dryer door, the metal sound echoing loudly. I fumbled with my quarters, my trembling fingers barely able to push them into the slot. 60 minutes. The timer lit up. An entire hour. The thought of it was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I retreated to my bench, a condemned man returning to his cell. The pretense of my phone was completely gone. It sat dark in my lap as I stared at the floor, my thumb hovering over the call icon for my roommate, Mark.
What would I say? "Hey man, there's a guy here and he's just looking at me." It sounded insane, paranoid. He hadn't done anything, not really. I chanced to look up. He was smiling. It was the single most unnerving expression I had ever seen. It was a thin, bloodless reptilian smile. It didn't touch his eyes, which remained as flat and dead as ever. It was the smile of a predator that has cornered its prey and knows it has all the time in the world. He pushed himself off the wall and took 2 slow, deliberate steps toward the center of the room, shrinking the space between us. He stopped, tilted his head slightly, and just held that smile, waiting. It was a challenge, a test. He was waiting for me to react, to show him the fear that was already consuming me from the inside out. That hour was the longest of my life, a masterclass in psychological torture. I sat rigidly on the hard plastic bench, and he occupied the center of the room, a silent, menacing statue. Occasionally, he would resume his slow, deliberate pacing. The smile would sometimes fade, replaced by a look of intense, focused concentration, as if he were trying to solve a complex puzzle that was sitting on the bench across from him. The dryer tumbled on, a rhythmic, monotonous thud, thud, thud that became a countdown timer for a confrontation I was desperate to avoid. My mind was a runaway train, careening through a landscape of terrifying possibilities. Robbery seemed too simple, too clean. His presence felt far more personal, more predatory than that. The ambiguity was a poison, allowing my imagination to conjure scenarios that were increasingly, graphically violent. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, every nervous twitch, every shallow breath, observed and cataloged. About 30 minutes in, he broke his stillness. He walked over to the vending machine in the corner, the one I hadn't noticed before, and studied the options with an absurdly serious expression. He fed a few crumpled dollar bills into the slot and made his selection.
The whirring of the machine's coils and the loud, explosive thump of a soda can dropping into the retrieval slot made me jump. He opened the can with a sharp crack hiss and took a long, slow swallow, his Adam's apple bobbing. He did all of this without taking his eyes off me. The act of buying a soda, so mundane and normal, became, in his hands, an act of profound intimidation. He was settling in. He was patient. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a siege. That realization was a sliver of ice sliding down my spine.
Finally, after an eternity of silent tension, the dryer buzzed. The sound was harsh, grating, and yet it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was my signal, freedom, but it also signaled the start of my most vulnerable moment. To get out, I had to turn my back on him. My hands were slick with cold sweat, my t-shirt clinging to my back. I stood up on legs that felt like they were made of jelly. The moment I rose, his smile returned, wider this time, as if in approval. Showtime. I walked to the dryer on autopilot, every instinct screaming at me to just run. I pulled the hot metal door open, and a blast of scorching, lavender-scented air hit my face. I began to pull my clothes out, not bothering to check if they were fully dry, not bothering to fold. I was a frantic machine, grabbing handfuls of hot, clean fabric and stuffing them into my hamper. My movements were jerky, uncoordinated. I dropped a sock. I saw it on the floor, a small gray ball of fabric, and made the conscious decision to leave it. My brain had made a calculation. One sock was a worthy sacrifice for 3 seconds of time. I could hear his footsteps on the linoleum, slow, measured, unhurried. He was closing the distance. "Looks like you're all done," he said. He was right behind me now, so close I could feel the coolness radiating from his soda can. I didn't turn. I didn't speak. I just kept grabbing clothes, my heart a wild animal throwing itself against the cage of my ribs. "You should be careful," he said, his voice dropping into a low, conspiratorial whisper that slid directly into my ear. "Leaving your things behind like that." He knew. He'd seen me see the sock, register it, and abandon it. It was such a small, insignificant detail, but in that moment, it was a declaration. I see everything you do. I notice everything you discard. I am in control. That was it. The last thread of my rational, stubborn composure snapped. Forget the clothes, forget the hamper, they were just things. I had my backpack slung over one shoulder. My wallet, my keys, my entire life were in that bag. Without another thought, without a backward glance, I bolted. I didn't just run, I sprinted with a desperation I had never known. I launched myself past the line of silent washers, my sneakers slapping against the floor in a frantic rhythm. The glass door seemed a universe away. As my hand slammed into the metal push bar, I heard his voice one last time, not shouting, but in that same, terrifyingly calm, conversational tone. "Don't worry," he called out, the sound chasing me into the night. "I'll pick that up for you." I burst out into the cool, dark air, gasping, my lungs on fire. I didn't look back, I just ran, my feet pounding the empty sidewalk, leaving behind a pile of warm clothes and my entire sense of safety in the buzzing, fluorescent hell of suds and duds. The run back to my dorm was a frantic, adrenaline-fueled blur. The quarter mile that normally took me 5 minutes of casual walking, I covered in what felt like 30 seconds. Every shadow thrown by a tree or a parked car was him. Every rustle of leaves in the bushes was his footsteps gaining on me. The world had transformed into a landscape of imminent threat. By the time I jammed my keycard into the dorm's reader, the plastic shaking in my trembling hand, I was on the verge of hysterics. The student on duty at the front desk, a cheerful but oblivious guy named Kevin, looked up from his textbook. "Whoa, dude, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't form a coherent sentence. A strangled noise that was half nod, half sob escaped my throat. I just hurried past him, ignoring his concerned call of "Liam?" and stabbed the button for the elevator.
The ride up to the 4th floor was an agony of waiting, my own reflection in the polished steel doors showing a pale, wild-eyed stranger. I burst into my room, slammed the door, and threw not just the lock, but also the deadbolt, a feature I had never once used. Only then, in the silence of my own space, did I allow myself to collapse. I slid down the door to the floor, my body shaking with violent, uncontrollable tremors as my mind replayed every second of the last hour on a torturous loop. The man's flat, empty eyes, his predatory smile, his final, chilling words. "I'll pick that up for you." He had the sock. It was a trophy, a token. My DNA was on it. The thought was so violating,
It made me physically ill. After an hour of sitting on the cold floor, I finally managed to call campus security. I gave them a heavily edited version of the story, focusing on the basics: a suspicious man at the laundromat on Elm Street, that he had made me feel unsafe. The dispatcher's bored, monotone voice on the other end was anything but reassuring. "Okay, sir, we'll send a car to do a drive-by." I knew it was a futile gesture. He wasn't there anymore. He had what he wanted: my fear and my sock. I never got the rest of my clothes back. The very idea of returning to that place, even in broad daylight, was unthinkable. A few days later, I bought a new wardrobe online, a significant dent in my student budget, but it felt like a necessary expense to reclaim some tiny piece of myself. For weeks, the fear was a living entity. I became a creature of paranoia. I'd walk the long way around to class to avoid Elm Street. I scanned every face in the dining hall, my food growing cold on my plate, searching for a ghost in a gray hoodie. I stopped going to the library at night. The world, once a place of casual, benign anonymity, now felt like a hunting ground. My grades slipped further. I started to think I had imagined the worst of it, that my anxiety had painted a sinister portrait out of a lonely, weird man. And then, about a month later, my rationalizations were shattered.
I was walking back from a friend's dorm around midnight. The campus was quiet, wrapped in a blanket of fog that softened the edges of the world and muffled all sound. As I approached my dorm building, I saw a figure standing across the street, partially cloaked by the skeletal branches of a large oak tree. They were preternaturally still, looking up at the building, my building. The fog obscured their features, but the silhouette was unmistakable. The posture, the gray hoodie. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I ducked behind a large parked SUV, my heart hammering against my sternum. Peeking around the bumper, I watched. The figure didn't move. They just stood there, a silent, patient sentinel, their gaze fixed on the fourth floor, on the quadrant of windows where my room was. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a vigil. After a minute that stretched into an eternity, the figure slowly turned and walked away, melting into the thick fog as if they were never there at all. I never saw him again. But the certainty of that night, the confirmation that he had followed me, that he knew where I lived, became a permanent part of my psyche. I never told anyone the full story, not the police, not my friends, not my parents. How could I explain a fear that was based on a look, a smile, a dropped sock, and a shadow in the fog? It was a story without a crime, without a witness, without a resolution. But I knew. He wasn't just a weirdo in a laundromat. He was a collector. And for some reason, on some random Tuesday night, he had decided he wanted to add a piece of me to his collection. The knowledge that he stood out there, in the dark, watching my window, is a violation that has never fully healed. It's a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of my life, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones that chase you, but the ones that just stand and watch.